I was the most feared man in the north of England, and I had never once been beaten, until a woman in a made-over gray gown sat down across a card table from me on the first night of the snow, and without so much as raising her voice, took everything I had. I did not see it coming. That is the truth of it, and I have had 30 years since to be ashamed of how blind I was. I saw only what the rest of the room saw, a paid companion of 1820, past the age when anyone bothered to look, seated at the far end of the table because the numbers were short and someone had to fill the chair. Her name was Miss Honora Blythe. She had been brought to Ravenscar as an afterthought, the way a shawl is brought in case the evening turns cold, and by the end of that first hand she had my measure entirely, and I did not yet have the smallest part of hers. Let me tell it the way it happened, because I have never told it whole, and a man should set down the one true thing that changed him before he is too old to remember the shape of it. Ravenscar Hall stands high in the fells, 3 days from London in good weather and cut off entirely in bad, which was exactly how I liked it. Every winter I filled it with people I did not much care for and set them to play. Cards, chess, riddles, wagers of every kind, a week of games while the snow closed the roads behind them. The county called it the Duke's Christmas Revels and thought me generous. It was not generosity. It was a trap, though a courteous one. I had learned, at a cost I will come to, that you cannot know what a person is by the way they smile at you across a dinner table, but set a wager between them and the thing they want, and you will see the whole of their character laid out like a hand of cards turned face up. I had grown very good at reading those hands. It had made me rich in the only currency I trusted, which was the certainty that I was never the fool in the room. That winter the house was full. There was Lady Comfrey, a wealthy, kindly, silly widow who laughed at everything and understood almost none of it, and it was Lady Comfrey who had brought Miss Blythe as her companion, to fetch her shawls and read to her and lose gracefully at whist. There was Mrs. Carroway and her daughter, Miss Sabine Carroway, who was the most beautiful woman I had ever stood in a room with and who had come, as her mother made no secret, to become the Duchess of Ravenscar by any road that would take her there. And there was Julian Danvers. I must speak of Danvers because he is half the story, though it grieves me still. He had been my friend at Oxford, or I had believed so, in the years when I still believed such things came free. He was charming the way weather is charming, you forget it can turn. He had a genius for making a man feel he was the cleverest fellow in England, right up until the moment he had what he wanted from him. I had reason to suspect him and no proof, and so I had done the thing I always did with men I could not read. I had invited him to Ravenscar to watch him play. On the first night then, the snow already falling thick past the black windows, we sat down to cards. I remember the fire high in the grate and the candles doubling in the dark glass and the whole overheated, perfumed press of them. Miss Carroway arranging herself, so the light fell kindly on her throat, her mother watching me watch her daughter, Danvers dealing with those quick, clever hands, Lady Comfrey exclaiming over her cards as though each new one were a small miracle. And at the end of the table, quiet as a closed book, the companion. She had not wanted to play. I saw that. Lady Comfrey had grown tired and begged off, and rather than break up the table someone had said, "Oh, let the Blythe girl take her place, she can hardly do worse," and there had been the small cruel laugh a room gives when it agrees that a person does not matter. Miss Blythe had come to the chair with the particular stillness of a woman who has learned to move through a room without being seen, because being seen has never once, in her experience, gone well for her. She wore gray. The gown had been good once and had been turned and mended and turned again, and she wore it without apology, which I noticed even then, though I could not have said why it lodged in me. She thanked the footman who drew out her chair, and no one else at the table thanked footmen. We played for high stakes. I always set them high. It is the surest way to see a person's heart. Miss Carroway lost prettily and often, glancing at me each time to be sure I had marked how little she minded, how a great fortune was nothing to her beside the pleasure of the company. Danvers won and lost and won, keeping the table warm with talk, and I watched the talk more than the cards, because talk is what a sharp uses to keep your eyes off his hands. And Miss Blythe, in her gray gown, said nothing at all and won. Not showily, she did not sweep the table. She lost small and won large, and she did it so quietly that it was some while before I understood I was watching the only real player in the room. She counted. I could see it in the flat, considering way her gaze moved once around the fan cards and then settled. She was holding the whole shape of the deck in her head, every card that had fallen, and playing not the hand she held but the hand that remained possible. I have known perhaps 3 men in my life who could do it. I had never seen a woman do it, and I had certainly never seen it done by a companion in a gray gown who had been put in the chair as a joke. I lost to her. That is the plain fact I have never told a living soul until now. I set a wager I was sure of. On a run of the cards I had all but counted myself, and she took it from me with a card I had forgotten was still in play, and she took it without a flicker, laying it down as gently as if she were sorry to trouble me. The table laughed at me, though they did not quite dare make it plain, because one does not laugh at the Iron Duke. Miss Carroway said, with that silver laugh, "Why, Miss Blythe, how fortunate you are!" And the whole room understood her to mean that fortune was the only thing that could account for it, that a creature like the companion could not possibly have done it on purpose. Miss Blythe looked up then. She looked, of all the people in the room, at me. And she said, quietly, so that only I truly heard the whole of it under the laughter, "It was not fortune, your grace. You led with the club. After that the hand was already decided. I only waited for you to finish losing it. I have been spoken to by kings. I have been threatened, flattered, courted, and cursed. I do not think anyone had ever, in my adult life, simply told me the truth to my face, expecting nothing, afraid of nothing, as though I were a man like any other who had made an error at cards and might as well know it. For a moment I could not speak. And then, I am not proud of this, I laughed. It came up out of me before I could stop it, a real laugh, the first in a long time, and the whole table turned to stare, because they had never heard the sound. "You are quite right, Miss Blythe," I said. "I led with the club, it was badly done." She inclined her head, the smallest possible motion, and gathered her small winnings into a neat stack, and I understood 2 things at once. The first was that I had at last, after years of setting traps for cleverer men and always springing them first, met someone at my own table who was cleverer than I the second, which took me longer to admit even to myself, was that in the whole overheated, perfumed, calculating press of that room, she was the only person I had the least desire to speak to again. The snow came down all that night and did not stop. By morning the drive was gone under it, and the low road with it, and Ravenscar was what it became every winter, an island in a white sea, and the house party was sealed in together whether we would or no. I stood at my window in the gray dawn and watched the last black line of the world disappear, and I felt the thing I always felt when the snow closed us in, a hard, clean satisfaction that now, at last, no one could leave until I had seen the whole of them. What I did not know was that this year the snow had not sealed my guests in with me. It had sealed me in with her. I found her the next morning in the long gallery, alone, where I had thought no one but I ever went. It is a cold room, north-facing, hung with the portraits of thorns who had all of them in their turn, been feared and lonely and sure of themselves, and I liked it precisely because no one else did. She was standing before the great chessboard that sits at the far end of it, an inlaid table set up mid-game, a game I had been playing against myself for a fortnight and could not resolve. She had her hands folded behind her back, the way a scholar stands before a difficult text, and she was frowning at the board with an absorption so complete she did not hear me come in. "White is lost," she said, when she did hear me without turning. "You will want to know it since it appears to be your game. White is lost in 4 moves however he plays, which I expect is why the game has sat here a fortnight gathering dust. You presume it is my game. "It is set to your hand," she said, and now she did turn, and there was no fear in her face, only that flat, considering attention she had turned on the cards. The book beside it is annotated in a large, impatient hand that has corrected the author 3 times and been wrong twice, and the household treats this room as though a bear lived in it, which suggests the bear plays chess alone. She paused. "I beg your pardon. That was insolent. I forget myself before a board." "Do not beg my pardon," I said. "I have not been told I was wrong twice before breakfast in some years. Show me." And she did. She came to the board and, without touching a piece, walked me through my own defeat, 4 moves deep, every branch, and I stood beside a paid companion in a cold gallery and let her teach me chess, and it was the most alive I had felt in longer than I could name. When she had finished, she stepped back, and the ordinary caution came down over her face again like a shutter, and she said, "You will not repeat that I lectured a duke in his own house. Lady Comfrey depends upon me, and a companion who forgets her place does not keep her place." "Where did you learn to play?" I asked, because I did not want her to go, and it was the only thing I could think of to hold her. "My father," she said. After a moment, as though deciding I could be trusted with the smallest coin of herself. "He was a soldier, a captain half-pay, more mathematician than officer, and he had no son, and so he taught me the things he would have taught a son. Games chiefly. He said a game was the only honest thing in the world because a game does not care what your name is or what you have, only whether you can see the board. He is dead now. I have very little of him left except the way he taught me to think, and that no one can take, which is fortunate, since everything else was taken some while ago." I had asked a great many questions of a great many people, always to find the weakness, always to win. I do not think I had ever before asked a question simply because I wished to know the answer. "And what became of the rest of it?" "Debt," she said simply. "There is always debt at the bottom of these stories. His, not mine, but a woman inherits her father's debts the way she inherits his eyes. She did not ask for them and cannot give them back." She said it without bitterness, which struck me more than bitterness would have. "So I am a companion. It is honest work. I fetch shawls and lose at whist on purpose, which is harder than winning, and I am grateful to Lady Comfrey, who is kind, and I do not, as a rule, correct dukes at chess. Good morning, your grace." She curtsied, exactly as far as was owed and not 1 inch further, and left me alone in the gallery with my ancestors and my losing game, and I stood there a long while after she had gone, and I moved the white king, at last, into the only square where it might survive, and found that she was right, it survived, but it never won. I should tell you now the thing that made me what I was, so that you will understand why I did what I did next, which was to begin, quite deliberately, to hunt her. When I was 22, I loved a woman. That is a common enough story, and I will not dress it up. Her name does not matter now. What matters is that she was clever and kind, and I believed every word she said to me, and I gave her the whole of my trust, which was all I had that was worth anything, being not yet a duke but only my father's heir. And she took it, and she played it patiently for 2 years against my title and my lands, in concert with a man I had called my dearest friend, not Danvers, though Danvers had known and said nothing, which I only learned much later. When the thing came apart, it came apart all at once, the way a bridge does, and I stood in the wreck of it and understood that I had been the only person at the table who did not know what game was being played. I did not break exactly. I did something worse. I decided I would never again be the last to know. I became the Iron Duke. I set my traps and sprang them first. I invited clever men to my house to watch their hands. I never trusted, never once, because trust was the club I had led with years ago, and it had lost me the whole hand. And I was, by every measure the world uses, a great success, feared, respected, never beaten, and so lonely that I had forgotten the word for it, the way you forget the name of a country you will never see again. And now here was a woman who had beaten me at cards without trying, corrected my chess without flattering me, told me the plain truth to my face expecting nothing, and asked me for not one single thing. She was the only person in 30 years who had no game with me, because she had already lost everything a game could be played for and had nothing left to want from me but to be let alone. And I could not let her alone. I told myself I only wished to test her to find, as I found in everyone, the seam of self-interest, the place where the honest surface cracked and the wanting showed through. I told myself that. I have had 30 years to stop lying to myself about it, and here is the truth. I wished to be near her because she was the only person I had ever met whom I could not read, and a man who has spent his life reading people will follow the one book he cannot open to the ends of the earth. So I made the games about her, though I let no one see it, least of all her. The next was a riddle hunt. It is an old Ravenscar amusement. I hide a token somewhere in the house and set a chain of riddles to lead to it. Each answer the clue to the next, and the guests hunt in pairs through the corridors while the snow beats at the windows, and there is a prize at the end and a great deal of shrieking and flirtation in the dark passages, which is the true point of it as far as most of them are concerned. Miss Carroway contrived, of course, to be paired with me and pressed close at every turn and read my riddles back to me with wide, helpless eyes, wanting me to solve them for her, wanting to be the sort of woman a man solves things for. And I found myself, the whole time, listening for another voice down another corridor. Miss Blythe had been paired with Danvers. I heard them before I saw them, heard her, rather, saying something dry that made even Danvers laugh. A real laugh, surprised out of him. She had solved every riddle before he had finished reading it aloud. I came round a corner in the dark, and there they were beneath a branch of candles, and Danvers had his charm turned full upon her, and she was regarding it with the same mild, unhurried attention she gave a difficult chess position, as though his charm were a gambit she had seen before and knew how to answer. "You are wasted as a companion, Miss Blythe," Danvers was saying, in the warm, confiding voice I remembered from Oxford, the voice that had emptied more than one purse. "A mind like yours. There are men who would make your fortune, if you knew how to let them." "I am sure there are," she said. "There are always men who would make a woman's fortune. It is remarkable how the fortune is always somewhere else and always requires her to trust them to fetch it. My father used to say that when a man offers to fetch you something from another room, you should count the silver before he goes and after he comes back." She smiled, quite pleasantly. "I have counted the silver, Mr. Danvers. Shall we go on?" "The next answer is a nightingale, and it is in the music room, and we are wasting candles." I stepped back into the dark before either of them saw me, and I stood with my heart doing something I had not permitted it to do in years, and I understood that she had read Julian Danvers to the bone in the length of a corridor. This man I had brought all the way to Ravenscar to catch, and had disposed of him with a story about counting silver. She had, without knowing it, done in 3 minutes the very thing I had built my whole cold life to do. And I wanted, with an intensity that frightened me, to be the one man in England she did not count the silver against. She won the riddle hunt. Of course she won it. She reached the token, an old campaign medal of my grandfather's, which I set as the prize because it was worth nothing to anyone but a thorn, and I liked to see who would pretend to prize it. She reached it 2 riddles ahead of the pack, and when I put it into her hand she looked at it, the worn ribbon, the dull star, and something moved in her face. "A soldier's medal," she said quietly. "My father had one like it. They gave it him for a field where a great many men he knew did not come home, and he could never decide whether to be proud of it or ashamed, and in the end he was only sad, which I think is the honest thing to be." She held it out to me. "It is a thorn's, your grace. I cannot take it. It should stay in the house." "It is the prize," I said. "You won it." "I did not come to Ravenscar to win your grandfather's medal," she said. "I came to fetch Lady Comfrey's shawls. Let it stay." And she pressed it back into my hand and closed my fingers over it, and for one instant her gloved hand was over mine, cold from the corridors, and neither of us moved, and the whole shrieking party came round the corner in that instant, and she stepped back as though the touch had never been, and curtsied, and was the companion again. But I kept the medal in my breast pocket for the rest of that week, over my heart, where her hand had closed my fingers upon it, and I have it still. I will not pretend the house grew kinder to her as I grew. I did not yet have a word for what I was growing. The opposite. Mrs. Carroway had eyes in her head, and what those eyes saw was that the Duke of Ravenscar, who had never in memory sought out anyone, was contriving to be in whatever room the gray companion was in. And a mother hunting a dukedom for her daughter does not overlook such a thing. Miss Carroway began, in the small merciless ways that women of her kind have perfected, and that men are largely too stupid to notice, to make Miss Blythe's position at Ravenscar a misery. It was never anything one could name. A companion's chair moved a little further from the fire each evening. A remark, at dinner, about how fortunate some people were to be given the run of a great house so far above their station, delivered with a smile so sweet the words seemed a compliment until you tasted them. A ruined length of lace, and the suggestion, gently made before the whole drawing-room, that perhaps Miss Blythe, who had so little of her own, had not been able to resist it. I saw the trap laid in that one, and I saw Lady Comfrey, silly and kind, half believe it for a dreadful moment, and I saw Honora Blythe stand up under it without a flicker, and say, "If your ladyship will search my room, you will find nothing of Miss Carroway's, because I have taken nothing of Miss Carroway's, and I would be glad to have it settled, since a companion who is thought a thief cannot keep her situation, and I have no other." And she looked, as she said it, not at her accuser but at me, one flat, level look, not asking for help, only letting me see that she knew exactly what was being done to her and by whom, and had decided to meet it with the truth, because the truth was the only weapon a woman with nothing was permitted to carry. The lace was found, an hour later, snagged and forgotten under Miss Carroway's own workbox, where anyone might have dropped it, and no more was said, and the company decided among themselves to forget the whole affair, and only I understood that I had watched a woman with nothing at all in the world defend the single thing she had left, her name, against people who could have bought and sold her 10 times over, and had done it with nothing but her own straight spine and the plain truth, and had won. That night I could not sleep. I went down to the gallery, where I always went when the house grew too loud in my own head, and she was there. Of course she was there. The one cold room no one wanted. She sat at the chessboard with a single candle, playing both sides against herself in the dark, and she did not startle when I came in, only said, without looking up, "White is winning tonight. I found the move you missed." I sat down across the board from her. It was, I think, the first time in my adult life I had sat down across from another human being with no game in my heart, nothing to win, nothing to guard, nothing to spring. I only wanted to be in the room with her. We played. We did not speak much. She was better than I, and we both knew it, and neither of us minded, which is a thing that had never in my life been true of a game. I had never once not minded losing, because losing had cost me everything I had ever cared for. But across that board, in the candlelight with the snow ticking at the glass, I lost to Honora Blythe again and again, and found that it did not feel like losing. It felt like being seen. She saw every move I made, saw the whole shape of my play, and she did not use it against me. She only met it. Do you understand what a thing that is, to a man who has spent his life certain that anyone who truly saw him would use it to ruin him? She saw me, and she did not reach for the knife. "May I ask you something, Your Grace," she said at last into the quiet, "that I have no business asking? You have corrected my chess and my cards and my judgment of my own guests. I do not think there is much left you have no business doing. Ask. Why do you do it, the games, the week of them? You set the whole county to playing, and you watch them the way a magistrate watches a court, and you never enjoy a single hand of it. I have watched you not enjoy them, and I cannot make it out. A man who so loves a game should be happy at a game, and you are the least happy man I have ever sat down across from, and I have sat down across from a great many unhappy men. No one had ever asked me, not once. I had built the whole cold engine of my life in plain view, and no one had ever asked me why it ran. I looked at her across the board, this woman who had lost everything and asked me for nothing, and I told her the truth, the whole of it. The woman I had loved at 22, the friend, the trust I had led with like a fool, the bridge coming down all at once, the vow I had made never again to be the last to know. I told her about the traps and the springing, the reading of hands, the certainty I had bought at the price of every warm thing a life is supposed to have. I had never said any of it aloud. It came out of me in the dark across a chessboard to a paid companion in a gray gown, and when I had finished, she was quiet a long while, and then she said something I have carried the whole of my life. "You have made yourself very safe," she said gently. "I understand it. I have made myself safe too. In my way I have arranged to want nothing, so that nothing can be taken. But I have noticed a thing about safety. Your Grace, sitting in Lady Comfrey's chair at the edge of a great many warm rooms. A person who cannot be beaten cannot be met. You have built a house where no one can defeat you, and the price of it is that no one can reach you either, because to reach a man you must be able to move him, and you have made yourself a piece that cannot be moved." She reached out and very lightly tipped my white king over on the board so that it lay on its side between us. "There, that is the whole of it. A king that will not fall cannot be checkmated. But it also cannot be crowned, because a crown is a thing that is given, and you have arranged never to be given anything so that nothing can be taken. I am not certain it was a good bargain. I made the same one. I am not certain it was good either." I looked at the fallen king lying between us in the candlelight, and I looked at her face, tired and honest and not young and more beautiful to me in that moment than anything I had ever seen in a ballroom, and I did a thing I had not planned and could not have stopped. I reached across the board and took her hand, her bare hand. She had taken off her gloves to play, and I held it, and I said, "Honora," only that, her name. I had not said it before. She let me hold her hand for the length of perhaps 3 breaths. I felt her pulse under my thumb, quick, and I felt her not pull away, and I understood that whatever this was, it was not one-sided, that the woman who had arranged to want nothing wanted, in that moment, something after all. And then she drew her hand back, gently, the way she did everything, and stood and said in a voice that was not quite steady, "It is very late, Your Grace, and I am Lady Comfrey's companion, and you are the Duke of Ravenscar, and there is no move on this board that ends well for a woman in my position. You know that better than I do. You have read every hand in this house. Read mine. I have nothing. A man in your place who takes an interest in a woman in mine ruins her, whether he means to or not, because the world will not believe the interest was honest, and a companion cannot survive being disbelieved. So please, let me keep the one thing I have left, which is that no one has yet been able to say a true bad word of me. Good night." And she left me alone in the gallery with the fallen king, and I sat there until the candle guttered, and I knew, with the cold, clean certainty I had spent my life cultivating, exactly 2 things: that I loved her, and that she was right, that everything I felt, however true, would be read by the world as a duke's idle cruelty toward a dependent woman, and would cost her the last thing she had, and that if I loved her I could not have her, not in any way that did not destroy her. It was Danvers who made my mind up, though he meant to do the opposite. The great card night was the climax of every Ravenscar week, the whole party at the tables, the stakes ruinous, the wine flowing, the year's real reckoning settled under the cover of play. It was, in truth, the night I built the whole week toward, because it was the night men forgot themselves, and a man who forgets himself shows you at last what he is. I had brought Danvers to Ravenscar to see him forget himself. That night he obliged me. I had suspected him of being a sharp for years, and had never caught him, because he was very good enough that the losses he engineered always looked like the ordinary bad luck of ordinary men. But that night the stakes were high, and the wine was low in the decanters, and there was, at his table, a young man named Fenwick, barely of age, playing far past what he could afford in the way that young men do when a smiling older man keeps telling them their luck is about to turn. I watched from across the room. And I watched Honora Blythe, seated as ever at the edge, watched the play at Danvers's table with that flat, total attention, her lips moving very slightly, and I realized she was counting his deck the way she had counted mine on the first night, and I saw the exact instant her face changed, the small, terrible stillness that came over her when she understood what she was watching. She stood. A companion does not stand and cross a crowded card room and stop at a gentleman's table, but she did it quietly, and she stood at Danvers's shoulder, and she said, not loudly but into a lull so that it carried, "Mr. Danvers, you have dealt yourself the Queen of Hearts twice in this hand. It is a very memorable card. I remember it going into the discard 11 minutes ago, and I remember it lying face down before you now. And a card cannot be in two places, so one of them is a second queen, and a deck with two queens of hearts in it is not the deck the young gentleman thinks he is losing to." The room went silent the way a room does when something real happens in a place built for pretending. Danvers laughed, the charming laugh, and said the companion was overwrought, that a lady who understood cards was a contradiction in terms, that she was mistaken and impertinent and ought to be sent to bed. And the room, God help it, began to agree with him, began to turn on her, because it is always easier to believe a charming man than a plain woman, and because a companion who accuses a gentleman has broken every rule the room lives by. I saw it turning. I saw her standing alone in the middle of it, having done the one truly dangerous thing a woman in her place can do, which is to be right about a man the room would rather like. And I saw that in another moment they would destroy her for it, and Danvers would walk out of my house untouched, and she would leave in the morning with her name in ruins, having spent the last coin she had to save a boy she did not know from a cheat. So I stood. "Search the deck," I said. I did not raise my voice. I never had to. "Mr. Danvers, you will remain seated, and Fenwick, you will turn over the deck before you, all of it here now, and we will count the Queens of Hearts and the Duke of Ravenscar's cards, and if there is one, I will beg Miss Blythe's pardon before this whole company on my knees, and if there are two, I let it hang. There will not need to be anything said if there are two. Everyone in this room will understand what has been done, and to whom and by whom." They counted the queens. There were two. One was up Julian Danvers's sleeve, which is where a second queen usually is, and the room saw it, and the charm went out of him all at once the way heat goes out of a room when a door is opened onto the snow. And he was, in the space of a minute, exactly what he had always been under the charm, which was a small, cold, frightened man who had spent his life taking from people who trusted him, because he had never in his life earned anything he had. I had him put out of the house at dawn, snow or no snow, with a lantern and a warning, and that is the last I ever saw of the friend of my youth, and I felt nothing at all, which told me how long dead the friendship had truly been. But that is not the part of the night that changed me. This is the part. When it was over, when Danvers was gone from the room and Fenwick was white and shaking and thanking her, and the party was breaking up in that overexcited, whispering way, I looked for her to, I do not know, to thank her, to tell her she had been magnificent, to say something of the great warm thing that had risen up in me watching her stand alone in the middle of a hostile room, and speak the truth because it was true and someone would be hurt if she did not, though it cost her everything and saved her nothing. I looked for her, and Mrs. Carroway got to me first. She got to me first, and she was clever than her daughter, and she had seen everything all week, seen where my eyes went, seen the medal in my pocket, seen the gallery light burning late 2 nights running, and she said to me, low and smiling, in the voice of a woman offering a duke a great confidence for his own good, "How fortunate, your grace, that your companion is so very quick with a deck of cards, so very practiced. One does wonder where a girl of no family learns to count a deck like a Covent Garden sharp. One does wonder what such a girl is playing for, taking up so much of a great man's notice. They are all playing for something, your grace, girls like that. You of all men must know it. She has played this room beautifully tonight, has she not? Made herself the heroine of it in front of you at the very moment your eye was on her. One does wonder if the whole thing was not arranged. And here is my shame, the deepest of the story, the thing I have never forgiven myself and have had 30 years to fail to forgive. I believed her. For the space of an hour I believed her. Because Mrs. Carroway had reached, with the sure instinct of the cruel, for the one wound I had never let heal. The old certainty that anyone who truly reached me was reaching for the knife. That trust was the club I had led with once and lost the whole hand. That the woman I loved at 22 had also been clever and kind, and had also seemed to want nothing, right up until the moment she took everything. I had told Honora that story myself in the gallery with my own mouth, and now a voice at my ear was telling me that the whole gentle, honest, unwanting thing I had seen in her was the longest, most patient game of all, played by the cleverest player I had ever met, played on the one man rich enough to be worth the playing. And I, who had built my whole life on the certainty that I would never again be the last to know, believed for one black hour that I was the last to know again. I found her in the gallery. She was there, of course, and she turned when I came in, and there was something in her face I had not seen before, something almost like hope, the raw beginning of it, quickly hidden, the look of a woman who had done a brave thing and half let herself imagine it might be seen and prized. And I, God forgive me, I put on the Iron Duke, the cold face, the reading face, and I said, in the voice I used on men whose hands I had caught, "That was very well done, Miss Blythe. Extraordinarily well done. One almost cannot see the joins. Tell me, how long have you been playing this particular hand? Since the first night, when you let me beat myself at cards so charmingly? Or did you decide on the long game only when you saw how rich the stakes were?" I watched it land. I have watched a great many things land on a great many faces, and I have never, before or since, watched anything land the way that landed on hers. She did not weep. She did not protest. She simply closed. The whole living light of her, the thing I had followed through the cold rooms of my house all week like a man following the only warmth in winter, went out, deliberately, the way you snuff a candle you have decided you cannot afford to keep lit. And she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, in a voice with nothing left in it at all, "I see, of course. I forgot the rule. I told you the rule myself the first night, that fortune is the only thing a room like this will allow a woman like me to have, because the other thing, the true thing, cannot be believed of us. I broke my own rule. I let myself be seen doing something worth seeing in front of you, and now it cannot have been honest, because nothing a woman like me does in front of a man like you can ever be believed to be honest. You have read my hand, Your Grace, exactly as I asked you to, 2 nights ago in this room. You have read it as a lie. I cannot make you read it otherwise. That is the whole horror of my position, and I have always known it, and I was a fool for 1 week to forget it." She curtsied exactly as far as was owed, not 1 inch further, the same measured curtsy she had given me the first morning, and it was the cruelest thing she could have done, because it told me she had put me back exactly where she kept the rest of the world. "The road will be passable in a day or 2. Lady Comfrey and I will go the moment it is. You need not trouble yourself about me again. I have taken nothing of yours, Your Grace, not even the medal which I gave back. Remember that when you are old." She took nothing. And she left me in the gallery, and I stood there with the fallen white king still lying on its side where she had tipped it 2 nights before, and I understood that I had done it. The thing I had spent my whole cold life terrified of having done to me, I had done to the one person who had never once deserved it. I had been offered the only honest hand I had ever been dealt, and I had called it a cheat, because I was too great a coward to believe that a thing could be given to me and not, in the end, be taken back. I did not sleep. I did not try. I sat in the gallery all night with the fallen king, and I did the only thing I knew how to do, which was to read the hand, to read it properly this time, the way she had taught me, holding the whole board in my head, every card that had fallen since the first night, and to ask not what I feared but what was true. And when a man reads a thing honestly, God help him, he cannot unsee it. I saw the metal pressed back into my hand. I saw a woman who had refused every prize, corrected me expecting nothing, asked me for not one thing in a week of chances that a fortune hunter would have seized with both hands. I saw her cross a crowded room to save a boy she did not know at the cost of her own name, at the exact moment when a woman playing me would have stayed small and safe in her chair. Mrs. Carraway had told me Honora made herself the heroine to catch my eye. But a woman catching a duke does not accuse his guest of cheating and set the whole room against herself. A woman catching a duke flatters and yields and loses prettily and glances up to be sure her fortune is noticed. Honora Blythe had done the precise opposite of everything a fortune hunter does, every hour of every day, and I had known it. I had known it in my bones from the first night, and I had let one cruel voice at my ear talk me out of the one true thing I had ever seen, because a coward will always prefer the lie that keeps him safe to the truth that requires him to risk being hurt. I had told her myself in that room, a king that will not fall cannot be crowned. And she had tipped my king over to show me what I was. And when she offered me, at last, the thing a crown is, a thing given freely that could be taken away, that made me vulnerable as I had sworn never again to be. I had scrambled back up onto my safe cold square and called her a cheat for offering it. The snow stopped in the night. By morning the sky was that hard scrubbed blue that comes after a long fall, and the men were already at the drive with shovels, and I knew I had at the most a day, perhaps less. And I understood that a private apology would not answer, that I had wounded her publicly in effect, that the whole house had spent the week watching the Duke's strange interest in the companion, and would spend the journey home deciding it had come to nothing because she was, after all, only a scheming girl who had overreached, exactly as Mrs. Carraway wished them to decide. A private word would save my conscience and leave her name precisely where I had helped to leave it. If I meant it, if I meant any of it, I would have to do the one thing the Iron Duke had never done in his life. I would have to stand up before the whole company and lose, publicly, on purpose, with everything on the table. So I called them all together. It was easily done. A snowbound house is glad of any event, and word that the Duke wished the whole party assembled in the great hall before the roads cleared brought them all down, curious, Mrs. Carraway and her daughter foremost among them, certain, I think, that I meant to make some announcement in their favor, since the field as they saw it was now clear of rivals. Lady Comfrey came, bewildered and kind. And Honora came, because a companion goes where her lady goes, and she came in her gray gown with her face closed and her spine straight and would not look at me, and stood at the very back at the edge, where the room had always kept her, and where I had, to my everlasting shame, helped to keep her. I had them bring the card table into the middle of the hall. The very table from the first night. I sat down at it in front of the whole company and I said, I have a wager to propose, the largest I have ever set at Ravenscar, and I mean to lose it. They laughed uncertainly. The Iron Duke did not lose. It was the thing everyone knew about me, the way you know a mountain is high. On the first night of this party, I said, a woman sat down at this table because the numbers were short, and she beat me at cards, and when the room laughed and called it fortune, she told me the truth to my face, that I had led with the wrong card and finished losing the hand myself, and that she had only waited for me to be done. It is the truest thing anyone has said to me in 30 years, and I have spent the days since proving her right in every particular. I led with the wrong card. I have finished losing the hand myself, and I would like, before you all, to say so plainly, because I did her a wrong in this house last night in private, that I now mean to undo in public, since a wrong done to a person's name can only be mended where the name lives, which is in the mouths of other people. The hall had gone very still. I did not look at Mrs. Carraway, though I felt her go rigid. I looked at Honora at the back, and she had lifted her face at last, and her eyes were on me, wide and wary and disbelieving, and I spoke the rest of it to her, though I said it loud enough for the furthest corner of the room to carry it home to the county. Miss Blythe exposed a card sharp at my table last night and saved a young man from ruin, at the cost of setting a whole room against herself, which is a thing no one plays for, because there is nothing in it to win. She did it because it was true, and because someone would be hurt if she did not, and that is the only reason she has done anything since she entered my house. She has refused every prize I set. She gave back a medal worth a fortune to no one but me and pressed it into my hand and told me to let it stay. She has asked me for nothing, in a week when any other guest under this roof would have asked me for everything. And last night, when a voice I should have known better than to heed told me that all of it was a long game played for my fortune, I who have built my whole life on never again being the last man in the room to know the truth, I believed the lie because it was the coward's belief, the safe one, the one that let me keep my cold certainty and risk nothing. I called the one honest hand I have ever been dealt a cheat. That is what I did. I want it said plainly, and I want it said here, so that no one leaves this house tomorrow able to say a true bad word of Miss Honora Blythe, because there is none to say, and any who says one will answer to me. You could have heard the snow settling on the roof. Mrs. Carroway's face was a study. Miss Carroway had gone white. And Honora stood at the back with her hand at her throat, and the closed thing in her face had cracked, and I could see her fighting not to let it, fighting the terrible, dangerous rising of hope in a woman who has learned that hope is the most expensive thing she can be caught carrying. I stood up from the card table. I came around it, across the whole length of that hall, past the beautiful woman who had come to be my duchess and the cruel one who had come to make her so, past silly, kind, bewildered Lady Comfrey, to the edge of the room where they had always made her stand, and I stopped in front of Honora Blythe, and I did the thing that a king who will not fall can never do. I let myself fall. You told me, I said, low now only to her, though they all leaned to hear it and I did not care, that a king who cannot be beaten cannot be crowned, that a crown is a thing given, and that I had arranged never to be given anything, so that nothing could ever be taken. You were right, as you have been right about everything since the moment you sat down at that table. I have arranged my whole life so that no one could reach me, and the price of it is that I have been, until this week, the loneliest man in England, and did not know the word for it until you sat down across a chessboard in the cold and named the whole of me in 4 sentences and did not use one of them against me. I took her hand, her bare hand, the same hand I had held in the gallery, and this time I did not let it go. I am not asking you to lose to me, Honora. I have spent my life making people lose. I am asking you to beat me. I am asking you to reach across the board and tip my king over and take everything I have, my name and my house and my whole cold, guarded heart, and be my duchess, and know that a duke who asks it in front of this room on his own honor, having said aloud that the fault was his and the honor is yours, that duke cannot afterward be believed to have trifled with you, because I have made it impossible, on purpose, which is the one useful thing my whole misspent cleverness has ever built. I have put everything I have on this table. I mean to lose it to you. It is the only game I have ever wanted to lose in my life. Please. Take it. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw her do the thing she did, the flat total attention, reading the whole board, reading me. Every card I had turned face up in that hall, the medal and the confession and the fallen king and the whole of it. And I stood before her and let myself be read, all of it, the knife and the wound and the 30 cold years, and did not reach for a single defense, because I understood at last that being read by her was not the ruin I had spent my life fearing. It was the only thing I had ever wanted. It was being met. And Honora Blythe, dowerless spinster of 1820, companion, keeper of her father's honest games, who had arranged to want nothing so that nothing could be taken, reached out with her free hand and laid it, very lightly, against my chest, over the pocket where the medal was, where her hand had closed my fingers a week before, and she said, in a voice that shook and did not care that it shook, "You led with the truth this time, in front of everyone. against your own safety. Her mouth trembled toward something that was almost the old dry humor and became, instead, something far more dangerous, which was tenderness, offered at last and unafraid. That was very well played, Your Grace. I did not think you had it in you. And then, so quietly that I do not think the room heard it, though I have heard nothing else so clearly in 30 years. Yes, I will take it. God help us both, I will take the whole hand. We were married in the spring, when the fells were green and the whole cold white world that had sealed us in together had melted and run down into the rivers and away. Mrs. Carroway and her daughter had left the moment the roads cleared, and I heard, years later, that Miss Carroway married a viscount and was tolerably unhappy, which I confess I did not grieve over as I ought. Lady Comfrey wept at the wedding and declared she had known it all along, which she certainly had not, and gave Honora as a wedding gift a shawl, the fetching of which had been the whole occasion of her coming to Ravenscar, and Honora keeps it still. We play chess most evenings in the long gallery, under the portraits of all the feared and lonely thorns who never once let anyone reach them and died sure of themselves and cold. She still beats me, more often than not. I have never minded. I stopped, the night she named me, being a man who minds losing, because she taught me the thing my father's whole line never learned in 300 years, that there is a losing that is only losing, and there is a losing that is being crowned, and that the difference between them is whether you are handing your whole self across the board to someone who will hold it, or having it taken by someone who will not. I was the most feared man in the north of England. I had never lost a game in my life. And the best thing I ever did, the thing that made a warm man out of a cold one and a home out of a fortress, and in the fullness of time, a family out of two people who had each arranged to want nothing. The best thing I ever did was to sit down at a card table one snowed-in night across from a woman in a made-over gray gown, and lose. She is asleep now, upstairs in the house that is warm at last in every room. It took her being in it. I am an old man and I have said the whole true thing at last, and I find I am not ashamed of the losing part of it any longer. Only grateful. She reached across the board, all those winters ago, and tipped my king and took everything I had. I have never for 1 hour of one day regretted the loss of it.